we are seeing a lot of stuff happen around the world. I mean, we have the Brexit right now, and it seems like the vote is delayed and it might not happen until January. Do you think this deal is in the best interest of the people, or do you think this deal is in the best interest of the EU?
If they actually Brexit, it's in the best interest of the people. And if it gets scuttled, which it looks like internally that's what's happening, it's against the will of the people. It's obviously in favor of the EU.
Yeah, I mean, EU right now, I mean, they're making threats that, you need to accept this, you need to accept this. And every time I hear a central banker or an organization or government make threats that you have to do something, to me, that's not in the best interest of the people. That they're forcing them to do something that they don't want to, the people don't want.
Right. And I would add that if the Brexit is denied, what you Britain in London, probably be multiples of what's happening in Paris.
In France, the protests are just unbelievable right now. The yellow vests, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of people, and I see Macron, he's trying to calm the situation down by giving tax relief and things like that, but it looks like the yellow vests are rejecting this. I mean, what do you think their motivation is now?
Well, first off, by Macron hiking wages and lowering taxes, pretty much has now called their credit rating out. So you are seeing CDS rates expand higher, and you're seeing their bond market weaken. I think it's interesting. I'm not sure if you saw it or not, but did you see how many of the yellow vests have either a big Q on the front or Q sent me or whatever?
Yes.
And there was also, you had chants with tens of thousands of people for Trump. So populism is spreading. And I mean, obviously you need to view that as a good thing because it means the bankers are losing.
Yeah, I mean, it's spreading, and I think other countries are going to start to join in. I think this is a huge movement. I think that the people are rising up and they're saying, something, we don't want this anymore. And I think the central bankers, I think they're nervous. I think there was an article that was released that the central bankers, they're nervous about their independence, that governments, the people, they're questioning the independence. Just like Trump is questioning the Fed and contradicting the Fed, I think this is spreading around the world. And I think they're very nervous about this.
Right. The bankers are worried about losing power.
And if they lose power, what happens?
The mainstream media, you don't see any of this on our media anywhere.
No.
I mean, it's just a little skirmish when in fact they're huge protests. And like you said, several 100,000 people.
So let's move on to what is happening with Meng, who is the CFO of Huawei, and she was arrested, and I believe Trump didn't know anything about this. Why do you think they arrested her?
Well, let's go back first. You're saying Trump didn't know anything about this. That's what he says, is that he had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
My question would be, I mean, it could be only one of two things. Either he knew about it and is not telling the truth, or he did not, in fact, know about it. And my question would be, which one's worse?
Yeah.
I mean, how could he not know about it? It seems, and how could he not know about it and Bolton did know about it? And how could it have been done exactly, the arrest done exactly the same time as their lunch meeting in Argentina for the G20?
Which brings up the question, Trump was working on a trade deal with Xi Jinping, and this arrest happened at the same time. And some people are saying that, the deep state went ahead and they arrested Meng from Huawei to try to disrupt the trade deal that Trump was trying to make with Xi Jinping.
That very well could be. You need to understand the mindset of the Chinese people. They're very proud people, and it's horrendous to be shamed in public, and that's what this was a public shaming. Now, obviously, you have to wonder, are there going to be reprisals? And I guess this morning there was an ex-banker. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But you do need to look at this. It'd be like the same thing as, I guess, Bill Gates or someone like that being arrested in, say, Thailand, and put in jail and awaiting extradition to China. I mean, this is really, really something big.
Yeah.
And I would say that this is the biggest event on the table right now, just because of the potential of what China could do. Some people are saying, oh, well, China will start dumping their $1.1 trillion worth of treasuries. And I don't really view that as a big problem, because the Fed will print whatever they need to buy whatever treasuries are sold. So that's not a bullet to the head. An easy bullet to the head would be step up, bid on COMEX for contracts, and then stand for delivery, not back down, not allow those contracts to be EFP'd to London and say, we want our metal and we want it now. COMEX has a whopping 4 tons. I mean, you're not even talking $200 million of registered inventory. So they could uncover the fractional reserve nature of the entire system with $250 million trade.
So what would happen to the gold market if they did this? I mean, you're saying if they went ahead and did this, what would happen?
Well, in essence, there wouldn't be a gold market, because there'd be no gold for sale. I mean, if it turns out that COMEX defaulted, who in their right mind who owned gold would sell it for any price? You'd want to wait and see the smoke clear and see where it settles at multiples higher than where it is now.
So, and how would this affect the global economy then?
Well, what that would be is it would be proof that we live in a Ponzi scheme, in a fractional reserve system, and there's not enough reserves to meet demand. And we're talking about in the gold market, but the entire banking system itself is a fractional reserve system. So confidence would break. You would see markets destroyed very quickly all over the world.
So we would see markets destroyed all over the world, and it would hit the United States. The United States would then it would hit not just the United States, it would hit the entire Western world. The entire Western financial system would be hit by that, because the entire Western financial system relies on the dollar for 60% of central banking reserves. And it would lay bare the fact that the entire system is fractional reserve. It would be, you could call it a giant margin call, but a better analogy would be, it would be a giant bank run all over the world. This whole thing, I mean, when we're discussing this, it reminds me of what happened with Khashoggi with Saudi Arabia, where Brennan and all those players were out there trying to push, Trump into doing something against Saudi Arabia. And we know that Saudi Arabia, they're, the hub of the petrodollar.
Right.
Now we see, Meng from Huawei being arrested. I mean, Khashoggi was killed. And it seems like they're trying to do the same exact, or in my mind, they're trying to do the same exact thing. They're trying to disrupt the entire economic structure of the world.
Well, I wouldn't use the word disrupt. I would use the word collapse.
That's a better word.
We watched Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia turned to China, turned to Russia, and started refusing to take dollars for oil. then it's completely over for the petrodollar.
Right now, the IMF is out there, and they're saying that the U.S. economy is going to slow next year. And what's very interesting is that the mainstream media, which normally we don't see this, but all of a sudden they're coming out with article after article after article about there's a coming recession. Now, this is they're completely in the opposite direction of what Trump is reporting, where he's showing the normal unemployment, stock market, GDP numbers, and the rest. So why are they on opposite sides here?
Well, it's a function of, as we just talked about, it's a function of, if you want to call it the deep state, trying to take the system down. They're trying to take the system down now so that there's no way, the blame gets put on Trump and there's no way Trump can get reelected. Dave, I want to go back just a second to the importance of this arrest, the Chinese.
Okay.
The most important thing in my mind, the world has already for several years been moving away from dollars. There have been lots of deals, trade deals made over the last year, 2 years, 3 years that did not include dollars. What this really brings forth is, how did they track what this woman did? This is a Chinese citizen from a Chinese corporation. Why does she have to obey U.S. law? What U.S. laws pertain to her? I mean, we can't pass laws in Congress that pertain to citizens of other nations.
True.
So the way what she did or what they did, had dealings with Iran and broke those sanctions, that was done. It was followed and tracked by the SWIFT system. So the reason this is so important is China already has a SWIFT alternative up, ready and running. So the biggest weapon, if you will, financial weapon, is the dollar, is the SWIFT system. And weaponizing the SWIFT system was a huge mistake, because the world could just switch over to the Chinese system. And where does that leave the U.S.?
Not just the Chinese, but Russia has their own payment system.
Right.
Europe is designing their own. So all these countries, or multiple countries, they're all designing a payment system outside of the U.S. payment system.
Exactly. And this speeds that up, and it calls further into question why would we want to use the SWIFT system when we can use something else?
Since you're bringing up Meng again and the arrest and they're holding her, and of course she's a Chinese citizen, I'm surprised that China, I mean, I haven't heard anything yet, hasn't stepped up and said, something, we want her back.
You cut out for a minute there. Can you repeat that?
I'm surprised that China, and I haven't heard it as of yet, why China isn't demanding the CFO should be brought back to China. They haven't demanded that as of yet, have they?
Well, yeah, they called in the Canadian ambassador. They called in our ambassador. And behind closed doors, you could pretty much bet they demanded this woman to be returned. She's also a very high-ranking member of the Communist Party.
Yeah. So I mean,
this is not going to go, there will be retaliation unless they release her. And the retaliation will be, in my mind, it'll be financial, and it'll be a devastating retaliation.
Yeah, and when you say this, that's why in my mind, I'm thinking if Trump was in the middle of making this great deal with China,
there's no way he would do that. There's no way. If he's negotiating with Xi, I believe he truly did not know. And that's obviously concerning, because how does he not know that this is happening while he's trying to cut a deal?
Right. I mean, this would not help his deal at all.
No, not at all.
So let me move on to the Fed. Now, the Fed is supposed to raise rates again this December. and the mainstream media is out there talking about, recession. I mean, with the Fed raising the rates right now, and one in December, maybe they'll do it again next year. Do you feel that by the Fed raising the rates, they are destroying the economy?
Well, they've already inverted the yield curve, so a recession is pretty much baked in the cake, and the fact that we have so much debt everywhere, whether it be consumer debt, corporate debt, state or federal debt, recession at this point is not there's no way it can be a garden variety recession. This is the biggest credit bubble in the history of history. How do you expect it to unwind? I mean, credit bubbles in the past, which were much, much smaller, ended up in financial panics. This is going to be the financial panic of all time.
And what's very interesting about this, you mentioned Q before being on the vests of the French people. Q actually posted something about the Fed where it said the president-elect knows that the Fed is trying to raise rates, bring them up and increase them, I think, March 2019. And Q was talking about there's going to be a restructuring of the Fed coming up. You think this, I mean, and we also know that Trump has Andrew Jackson hanging on his wall. Right. I mean, do you think this is the ultimate plan, is to take the central bank, the Fed, and maybe nationalize it or take it over or destroy it?
I think that very well could be. In my opinion, had Hillary won, we would have already collapsed. The Fed would have raised rates harder, faster, pulled the props out, the system would have collapsed. At this point, Powell was chosen by Trump.
Yeah.
And I don't think President Trump chose Powell, and then Powell all of a sudden went on his merry way, raising rates, trying to torpedo the system. It's my belief. First off, we believe there's going to be two resets. And when you're talking about a reset, you're talking about a new system coming forward. If in fact that's the case, how do you create or launch a new system? The answer is you have to destroy the old system. So it very well may be that Powell's playing a role here in popping the bubble, the credit bubble. Then we have a reset. We believe the first reset will probably include the SDR, which the SDR is no better than dollars, simply because it's a basket of bad currencies. They're all fiat currencies. None of them have any backing whatsoever. It's the second reset, once that fails, is where we believe that gold will come back into the system. It'll be marked up multiples so that central banks have capital, real capital, that they can lend off of. And on top of that, gold coming back into the system marked up at much higher levels would back currencies on a ratio basis. Now, some people, or a lot of people, say, oh, well, there's not enough gold in the world to back currencies. Well, that's correct at this price. It depends on what you price gold at. If you had gold priced at $100,000 an ounce, or pick a number, I don't know what the number is, but if you had gold at many multiples of what it is right now, there'd be plenty of gold.
So you're saying two resets. Now, the first one you said is going to be the special drawing rights.
Right.
That's from the IMF, right? Now, the second reset, do they get rid of the SDR?
Well, I think the SDR simply fails because it's, as I said, it's a basket. That system fails, and it'll probably fail due to lack of confidence.
And once it does fail, is gold then going to be the backstop for fiat currency, or is it just going to be, held to build confidence like China and Russia right now?
Exactly. It'll be held. It'll back currencies on a ratio basis. It will not be convertible. So in other words, you won't be able to take your fiat currency, bring it into your bank or central bank and get gold for it. That's not what's going to happen, because anytime a currency is convertible, it gets converted. I mean, history shows us that every fiat currency or every currency that was backed by gold, if it's convertible, it does get converted. I mean, that's why FDR took us off the gold standard, and why Nixon in 71 shut the gold window, because the dollar was convertible and France and other nations were converting their dollars into gold.
Let me back up for a sec. With this reset, if the way Q is, telling us that there's going to be a restructure in this system, do you think that they're trying to make it as less painful as possible when the system comes down? I mean, let's say Clinton was president or somebody else was president. Do you think the central bank would care, where they just drop the economy?
No, it would have been max pain. This time around, I mean, since Trump has won, if the Fed does go away, they need to be blamed for the last 100 years. They need to be blamed for the credit bubble. The Fed did it. They need to take the blame for it. And I think that's what is being set up right now.
Yeah, and that's why when you look at what Trump tweets out, he says, if the economy fails,
right,
it's the Fed's fault.
Right, exactly.
And it looks like he's setting that up.
Exactly.
So last time we were on, this was before the midterms, and we talked about, the declassification, we talked about arrests, and here we are after the midterms.
Right.
And we have not seen, those individuals that everyone wants to see arrested. I mean, a lot of them are now, involved in testifying in hearings, like Comey just did one. We have Huber, Clinton coming up. Do you think we're going to see the declass? Do you think we're going to still see arrests?
Yeah, I do. First off, the executive order that Trump signed back in, what was it, just about a year ago, December 21st or 23rd of last December, does not take effect until January 1, this coming month, January 1 of 2019. I had a discussion about this last night. If you think about the FISA warrants that were used against Trump for the phony Russian investigation, who has had the power for the last 2 years to present FISA applications to judges? Who's had the power? In other words, who within DOJ, FBI, etc., for the last 2 years has been able to use FISA warrants, use the NSA, use the tools that had been used in the past to basically follow every single conversation that let's call them traitors, that the traitors have had for the last, call it, year and a half. I mean, every email, every phone call, every text, even Xbox conversations. These have all been tracked. And it just seems to me that the left was very, very, very sloppy while Obama was president. And they were sloppy because they assumed that Hillary was going to become president. And if Hillary became president, none of it would ever see the light of day. So now, over the last year and a half, I think we're going to find that they were again coming forth of treason, pedophilia, you name it.
And I think they weren't really worried about how sloppy they were, like you said,
right?
Because they thought, no one is ever going to come in here and find any of this stuff.
Exactly.
And that's why I think it's very funny, because when Trump came into office, I mean, they were all saying that he's a racist and making up all these different words that he was. But that was cover because they knew why he was there. They knew that he was going to be going after all this information.
Right.
And that's really what they're worried about.
Exactly.
So how corrupt do you think government is? I mean, we just talked about a reset in the economy. How corrupt do you think government is? I mean, it just can't be these couple of players.
Oh, no. It goes very deep. It goes all the way to the top. I mean, obviously, look, just take Hillary, for example. I mean, Uranium One. You're doing a pay for play for 20% of America's uranium. I mean, you're asking how dirty, how corrupt. I mean, you might as well call us Sodom and Gomorrah.
So, I mean, when you think about it, when they keep bringing up the term Russian collusion, wasn't it really Hillary,
Exactly.
Mueller? Wasn't that really the Russian collusion?
Yes, absolutely. And that's easily proven, and I believe it will be proven.
So far, Mueller has been in office and he hasn't found anything. There's no Russian collusion. I mean, he has, people that lied, but Comey has been testifying and he's been lying through his teeth.
Right.
Many other people have lied, but, they don't bring charges up against them.
Well, and that's the only thing that he's charged anyone for is lying.
Right.
He's got three. Papadopoulos, Flynn's not going to serve any time.
Right.
Manafort and Cohen. So they lied. The guy's going to get 40 years in jail for lying. I mean, right. I don't even know why these guys even answered anything. You just say, I want a lawyer, and I take the Fifth Amendment. End of story.
Yeah, I mean that's what they should have done.
Yes.
But who knows how the questions were asked? How do you know where the whole setting was? We have no clue of how all this was being done. So maybe they thought they were just being questioned and it wasn't really part of an investigation or something like that.
Well, we'll find out shortly, but I mean, there's stories out there that Mueller has been flipped, and that's a possibility.
Well, what's very interesting is that Trump, he's been tweeting out like crazy against Comey, against Mueller, against Clinton. And I do believe this is on purpose to get the public used to what is coming and continually bringing it up. And
it's also probably being used to create conversations amongst them that can be viewed, that can be recorded by NSA, recorded by the DOJ, FBI via FISA warrants. So I think he's stirring the pot on purpose. The tweet that he put out, 2 weeks ago, he forwarded the tweet. I first thought it was a joke. I just thought it was a cartoon and didn't pay attention to it until I found out that President Trump actually forwarded that tweet so now that the Russia collusion has been proven false.
Right.
When do the trials for treason begin? And you have to believe that that's not an idle threat. That's my opinion.
And he also tweeted out that picture of all the players,
right?
Obama, behind bars,
right?
And just the other day, they added Brennan to that picture.
Right, he was the only one that was missing.
Yeah. So I mean, he's projecting out there saying this is what's going to happen here.
Well, this is what should happen here.
And hopefully after January, we start to see things really accelerate and we start to see the indictments open up. Hopefully after, Clinton, if she ever does testify under oath about the email case, hopefully they catch her.
She doesn't even have to testify. All they have to do is dig into the Clinton Foundation. And I mean, that they don't even have the proper paperwork from day one. And how about the two airplane loads of boxes that went from Little Rock to the FBI. That was about a month and a half ago. You remember that?
Yes, I do. And
What
I'm
what was in that? Well,
don't.
I think we'll find out.
I think so. So, where do you think we are going from here with the economy? I mean, right now, Q has given us the March 2019 date for the next Fed increase of interest rates, saying that they're going to try to bring down the economy. I mean, do you think that's like a certain point that we should be looking at where the economy starts to come down, arrests are being made, all of it happening at the same time?
Well, it's not the economy; it's the markets. And it's not so much the stock markets; it's the credit markets. And if you look all over the world, liquidity is very tight. We have we're looking at inverted yield curves, and it's important to understand that in the past there have been recessions without inverted yield curves, but there's never been an inverted yield curve not followed by a recession. So it's all about the credit markets, and rates are going up into the most heavily leveraged system in all of history. And call it the pinprick. I mean, higher rates is gonna basically expose the weaker credits, and it'll go right up the food chain from the weaker credits to the strongest credits. I mean, look at GE. Look at Deutsche Bank. Each one of those are systemic on their own. You could have neither of those two go under, and it looks very, very likely that they will both go. There's just too much debt, and the debt is not repayable in current currency terms. So the only thing that can be done is you have a mass default and a reissuance of if the currencies were to stay, the currencies have to be devalued. So it's like a deflation and a hyperinflation at the same time. It's a currency event, and it's going to feel like hyperinflation, but the defaulting, the destruction of the credit that's been built up is a deflationary event.
Do you think that this collapse, this transition, is going to be a chaotic transition or collapse of the economy, or do you think that Trump is going to try to stabilize it as best they possibly can to make it easier for people? How do you think this is going to play out?
They can try to anything they want to try to stabilize it and make it the best they can. But when you're talking about a credit system as large as it is and oversized as it is today, with interest rates rising, liquidity falling, you're going to have major disruptions in the credit market, up to and I think better than a coin flip chance that credit markets actually seize up. What should have happened in 2008 or what was going to happen, I think is going to happen in spades this time around. And we've talked about this, or I've talked about this many times in the past. Distribution will not occur if credit markets collapse. And what I'm saying here is your Walmart, your grocery store, your gas station, et cetera, are going to be cleaned out of product. And without credit, distribution to restock the shelves is not going to happen. So you're talking about a major disruption. Is it 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months? I don't know. But you as an individual need to be prepared to go it on your own for however long this is going to last.